Hi everyone, I'm Leyla Salvade, founder of Standing Light. Welcome to the LightStyle interview series. I'm super excited to be here in Brooklyn at the Daybreaker headquarters with Tristan Harris, who is the co-creator of Time Well Spent.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited. And this was so last minute. You guys,
yeah.
Seriously, Radha just left and we just replaced
just part of the family.
Tristan.
Yeah, exactly.
He just walked in, everything's meant to be. It's a beautiful synchronicity. So I am super excited to shine a light on you today. And I know we met at one of the Daybreaker events a while
Probably.
ago.
And Radha gave me her amazing Daybreaker.
Of course she did.
Dressed me up in all the Daybreaker garbs just so I could be here.
I love it. So Tristan, tell us about yourself and what you're doing right now, how you're shining your light into the world.
I work on a movement called Time Well Spent right now, which is basically how do you take the way that the technology industry works and make it work more deeply for people? Right now, a lot of the tech industry is, because of the attention economy, they have to create these apps that basically vie for your attention. Even if you're trying to help people, you have to steal people's attention just to get into the game. And so how do we change the attention economy so that instead of competing to take attention from people's lives or maximize time spent, instead how do you help people maximize time well spent so that every app or website or media is competing to help people instead of to take time from people.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. And your background is quite interesting. You came from Google. And what were you doing there?
I started, before Google, I had a small startup company that was in this race for attention. That's how I got familiar with it. And then Google acquired our team, and so we landed at Google. And by making this presentation about a year into Google, I was kind of burnt out by essentially all of this email and calendar invites and just, there's all this technology all around me, but I was asking myself, is any of this, how much of this is really helping make a net positive contribution to my life? And how much are we in the tech industry just filling people up with stuff? There's a difference between filling people up with stuff and actually making a positive difference. But it's subtle because we get so many benefits from technology. And so when I was there at Google for about a year, I made this presentation, kind of like a manifesto deck, and it basically said, we as Google have a huge responsibility in how we're shaping how 1 billion people think every day when we put this device in people's hands that opens up a doorway for all these people to grab at your attention.
Right.
And what is our responsibility as Google in protecting people? And so this presentation ended up going viral at Google. About 5,000 people saw it, and it went all the way up to the executive team. And it kind of started this little revolution, and then I ended up sort of transitioning to be working on design ethics, which is how do you ethically shape people's minds?
Wow.
How do you ethically persuade people? And so that's what I did at Google for several years, and then I left because I realized that the only way to change the system is from the outside. You can't do it from inside the big companies.
So how are you doing that now?
A lot of public media and writing and advocacy. So one of the problems is that you can't ask Snapchat or something or Facebook or Instagram to do less of what they're doing. If you said, hey, you're too good at addicting people, you're too good at grabbing people's attention, you can't ask them to take less attention, because then YouTube's going to swoop in and get the attention that you left on the table.
It's competition.
It's competition. And so the only way to do it is to change what they're competing for. So instead of competing for just attention and making money from just attention, how do we make it so that money and success are tied to benefit?
You're changing the source.
Yeah. And so that's why we call it time well spent, because currently everyone's competing for time spent or engagement, as much time spent as possible. And how do you instead compete for time well spent? So for the part of someone's life you're trying to benefit, how do you win on those terms? So for example, how does news win the better at telling people the truth, or the better at informing people's understanding, versus the better it is at grabbing the next 5 seconds of your time? How does Netflix compete in the attention economy? Not by maximizing how much you watch, but by asking what would be time well spent for you, and helping you watch that 1 or 2 movies a week that are actually time well spent for you, and then not trying to grab your attention beyond that. So you can think of it almost like there's this urban plan. We live inside of this city, and it's kind of disorganized right now. We're all getting into accidents. We're all getting distracted. And the answer isn't like tear down the city. It's let's organize the city better so that it works better for people. It's more livable. And so right now that attention economy city is this just war zone of things trying to grab your attention.
It's a jungle.
It's a jungle. It's a mess. And that doesn't mean we should just, leave the city. It's how do we make the city work for us? And right now that city is constructed by 3 private companies, Apple, Google, and Facebook, kind of are the predominant urban planners. And they never really thought about what it means to make the city livable for people, because they're just making a tool. The problem is the incentives are such that everyone wants to build little casinos in the city, and there's no space for parks and the stuff that we would want to live into.
Right, the real nourishing part.
Yeah. And so, that's never been done before. So how do you even get people to think that way, to see themselves, to see the designers that say Apple and Google as like a Jane Jacobs who's trying to ask the question, like, what makes a great, screen livable, basically? What makes a great city great? What makes a great screen livable? Because when people check their phones 150 times a day, people are increasingly living by this device. It's steering more and more of their daily choices. But to really help people make the choices that they would want in their life, not just to consume more content, we have to ask different questions.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the top questions to be asked?
Well, I mean, to ask what does it mean to spend our time well is the ultimate question. It's because time well spent over the course of a lifetime is a life well lived. So if I repeatedly make time well spent choices, that would be on my deathbed looking back and saying, I lived my life the way I wanted to. And each of us have to answer that question for ourselves, but it just gets to a deep question. If you're a Google designer, or you're a Facebook designer, when you put stories in front of people, are you asking, am I helping someone, what am I helping someone do? Am I really caring about whether they're making the life choice that they want to make for the next 10 seconds, the next minute, the next 2 hours? Or am I just caring about maximizing content consumption? Right now, first we have to see that. So the big question is, am I willing to see that my goals as a tech company are actually different than people's goals for their lives? I'm trying to get them to watch more stuff. They want to live their life in the most fulfilling way. Consumerism makes it such that the people at tech companies are so good with their goals at getting you to do what they want you to do, that their goals become our goals, meaning that we become kind of infected. So we start to go to Facebook because we want to watch things. But that goal didn't come from us. There's no human being who woke up and said, you know what I really want to do with my life is watch content. But they're so good at giving us this stuff, spoon feeding what we'll watch, that becomes our own goal. And so that's why it's partly a consumer question, almost a spiritual question, you could say, of asking like, what is it that I actually want? And if we don't question it, then we just keep consuming stuff. So that's the consumer side. But then again, on the designer side or on the technology company side, asking, what benefit am I really trying to provide? And then seeing that there really is a difference between caring about someone's life and whether I'm helping them or not, like a teacher or a therapist or someone who's really trying to help. Versus, making a technology that I claim is helping make the world more open and connected, but really my goals are to maximize time on site. And not to say that means that you're evil or wrong for doing that, just to notice that the goals aren't totally aligned right now. So we have to align the goals.
What you are doing is so potent. It's so important for not just us here in New York or companies, or it's literally on a global level as a humanity. I mean, we have to go within and realize that we are these souls having a human experience, and everything is affecting us, and it's all energy at the end of the day, I think. And to tailor the questions towards our highest self rather than just being pulled, by three certain companies or whatever it may be. It's one of the most important conversations that has to be had at this moment in time, because we are changing and growing and shifting at an exponential rate that I don't think maybe a few knew, but most of us didn't, and we're all co-creating this reality right now. So people like you coming in and asking these questions, I mean, thank you, because it's so needed.
Yeah, I mean, it's really unprecedented that such a small number of people at a handful of companies in California, within like 50 miles of San Francisco, their choices, how they see what being human is about,
Right.
what they see as what they understand about how people make choices, what steers people's attention. Like right now, your attention, if I do that, whether you want to or not, the sound will cause our attention to go there. And so we're only kind of as good as the way that the people making technology think about what life is about, what being human is about, how people make choices, and then caring enough to say, okay, how can I most help someone? And like you said, the scale is unprecedented, that such a small number of people affect literally 1 billion people who use this thing.
Minimum.
Yeah, minimum. There's more like 2 billion. And the rate of change is so fast, like you said too. So oftentimes in the past, we've depended on, well, we'll just put some stuff out there, and if people don't like it, the system will self-correct. But there's all sorts of places like sugar and other, these things that are, not inherently evil, but that we don't, the cost shows up in the long run.
Right.
And so this race to the bottom, both of the brainstem, of what I can get you to do by tapping into lower and lower parts of ourselves, is also a race to the tightest and smallest asks, like the time scales of the most immediate, the most impulsive. And there's no race to help people live their longest, fullest life. Imagine if you're competing at that time scale. It's really a race to impulsively get the next 5 seconds of your time.
I'm curious, what was a moment, maybe one of the toughest, darkest moments that shifted something within you, where you started to ask these questions for yourself and notice this and become so aware, because you have a profound awareness of self as well as the collective consciousness, which seems to be at the heart of you, which is beautiful and it's rare. But what would you say was this moment that consumed you in a painful way, and you were able to then kind of grow from that?
Well, I when I landed at Google, up until then I was, what's the right way to say it? I was kind of blinded by the way I was seeing the world. I was in my way of seeing the world. And I couldn't see that there was a way that I was seeing the world that I could step back and observe and ask, is that all true? Is that all real? Or am I inside of what's, the David Foster Wallace, what's the water I'm swimming in? Ask a fish what's water, it doesn't know, it's just swimming in water. Unawareness. And whatever it was that I was swimming in, it wasn't serving me, because I was not feeling, frankly, very fulfilled. And I think, I was at Google, they had acquired our company, and I was a year into it, and many people would be so glad to be in the situation that I was in. But there's just something, especially having this desire to make, to be, I always want to live my life purposefully, I've always wanted that, but it felt like all of this talk about technology being a positive force, which we just assume, I was really questioning that. I mean, I was getting just bombarded in email and calendar invites and, just the natural flow of meetings and things like that, and just really wondering, is any of this really, how would we know it's doing something positive? I mean, the assumption is it lets you can consume more stuff, or you can do something faster, but is it actually better? If I can send more questions to people that they can't answer, but that they feel the need to respond back and say, oh, sorry, I don't know that, then I have suddenly this new traffic jam of just people sending each other questions that we can't answer to each other. You know, is that better just because people can send lots of messages at each other? So I was there at Google, and I really felt like there was something missing about when do I know that what we're doing is actually making life better. And in that moment that I was thinking about quitting, and that's when I made that presentation that ended up spreading to all those people.
Wow. What's so interesting is when we don't solve a problem at source, we just percolate it in a sense, right? And someone told me once that cars were invented because of horses making the street, like just riddening the streets of England with all their poop and stuff, and then they invented the car to eradicate that, to solve that problem. But then they basically just did it on a bigger scale, where they were, what's that word? Polluting, yes. Where they were polluting the environment. So I always think about that, because if we don't solve a problem at the source, we're just gonna expand it to a whole nother level.
It makes me think there's this this meme going around these days that Silicon Valley is trying to do all this life extension stuff, help people live longer. And it's like, well, hold on, how about we just try to help people live well right now? Same thing with Mars. Like, it's wonderful that we want to go to Mars.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
Shouldn't we, especially since we're...
Fix things here first, maybe?
Maybe fix things here first.
Thought.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing. It's like, with technology, because we can sell the next thing, and the engineers always excited to build the next thing. I think that's actually one of the reasons why you know, a lot of these issues now with the attention economy and all this distraction and noise that we experience with technology today, that one of the reasons it doesn't get solved with the current stuff is it feels like, well, people are so excited about building the next thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, that might exist, but right now there's billions of people who are living in this environment, like daily using Facebook or something. And a lot of people aren't feeling so good about that. There's a lot of loneliness that comes from that, a lot of distraction. And wouldn't we want to make that work better now? And how do we align incentives to reward the companies that do work to help make life better now?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, people are waking up and the first thing they think is, oh my gosh, I've got to get on Snapchat or Instagram stories to make my life look amazing and good, and then how many likes am I going to get and how many messages am I going to get? And it's based on that comment system almost, like self-worth is now based off of that, and that is just mind-boggling, you know? And I mean, I'm from Switzerland, so technology super duper helped my life because I was able to reconnect with all the kids I went to elementary school with, and my whole family's in Switzerland, so I can FaceTime well, FaceTime, nobody uses Skype anymore, but FaceTime with them all the time, and so that's a blessing for sure. But
and that feels like something that's more genuinely beneficial.
Exactly.
Like people
exactly.
With Time Well Spent, we've actually done. There's an app called Moment that tracks where your time goes on your phone, and then it asks users which uses of your phone, which apps, which experiences are you most happy about, and which ones are least time well spent, which ones do you most regret.
Wow.
And it's very consistent. The things people most regret are Snapchat, WeChat, Instagram, Facebook, all the social media ones that are used on average for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And the things that people are really happy about, I think that is maybe per day. For those who said they were unhappy about it, it was, I think, in that range.
Okay.
We can post a link or something. The ones people were happy about that were most time well spent were things like MyFitnessPal or Spotify or podcasts. I would think that FaceTime would show up there. Maybe FaceTime is not used as much as...
Well, people don't think of it as an app, maybe.
Right, yeah.
Perhaps.
I don't know how it shows up on the thing, but I know for me, if I were to think about, okay, here's these things that are happening with technology.
Yeah.
Which choices would I embrace in the long run? Is feeling like this is really making life better.
Yeah.
And I do think FaceTime would be up there for me, and podcasts and things like that. But you know, the question is, can we just steer more and more of our use towards that direction?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if the easiest choices to make would be the ones that we all feel best about on retrospect, instead of the easiest choices to make were the ones that are most impulsive and we regret later, you know?
Yeah. I feel that we don't talk about this enough, and many don't know that, but I mean, we also have a brain in our heart, and it's 10 times more intelligent than the brain in our head. And when we create deep coherence between the mind and the heart, that's when we're functioning from our best self, from our highest self, and we are most resilient. And I mean, that's all heart math. It's from the Institute of Heart Math. But I feel that when companies begin to integrate that notion into their core values, that's like you immediately immediately align, because you're using both. You know, you're using heart power and heart intelligence as well as the mind power, and helping people use their mind and learn, but also use empathy and love in perfect alignment, where a really powerful and sustainable ecosystem is built there forth. And I really think that that's the way forward, which is obviously at the core of your values and with what you're doing. So more and more that has to happen. Otherwise, we will have to go to Mars. We won't have another option.
Right. Which is why we should try to solve the problem right here, right now.
Exactly. Wow. I'm so taken with your heart, honestly. I mean, it's rare nowadays to find people that really care deeply about us rather than I or me or profit in a financial sense. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, I don't know what it takes for more people. You know, we all have needs, we all have to survive,
Yeah, of
we all have
course.
to have a bank account that
Of
has
course.
enough in it. But, you know, beyond that, I wonder really what it takes to liberate yourself to just say, what am I going to feel really makes a positive difference for people? And the choice to be a therapist or a teacher or an educator are
Right.
not easy economic choices to make
No,
either.
they're not. And they're not rewarded. That's the thing. They're not rewarded as much. And that's where the shift has to take place.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the school system, especially, in this country and Switzerland, it's not any better either. I mean, it's all geared towards, I mean, I had a traumatic school experience in Switzerland. It's like, unless you're going to be a mathematician or an engineer, you're an idiot. And that's all mind, it's not using the heart.
Yeah.
So we, from a very young age, we're conditioned to think with the mind rather than the heart. That's probably the number one question we should be asking ourselves. How does this feel? Rather, how do I think about this? Or
Well, and that also takes someone having the awareness of knowing how they feel.
Exactly.
Not just here, but in a whole bunch of other dimensions.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did with Google, we actually brought in, do you know Thich Nhat Hanh?
I spent time at his
At Plum Village?
Plum
Oh,
Village.
cool. Yeah. So his monks and Thich Nhat Hanh came to Google,
Wow.
and we had this meeting with all of the monks and the lead designers of the Google products.
Wow.
And we talked about, essentially, in Thich Nhat Hanh's words, it's like the phone is it's never been easier to run away from yourself,
Yes.
Yeah,
he said
and
that.
it's
At Plum Village.
what's that?
He said that at
He
Plum
said
Village.
that at Plum Village, yeah.
It's crazy.
And one of the interesting things that happened since then is that they've come to Google and just done these little exercises where they say, just breathe for 2 minutes, meditate, and then next thing they put the phone out in front of you. Phone's off, but they want you to keep your eyes open and look at it, and then just breathe for 2 minutes. Just notice what comes up. Then take the phone and put it in your hand. Keep it off.
Oh boy.
Breathe for 2 minutes. Just notice what comes up. Then turn the phone on and go to email, and don't do anything else. Just look at email and just notice what's coming up. And there's this whole other dimension of this inner world, this inner subjective world, that unless a designer has their own understanding of that for them, how in the world can they design it for other people? And it doesn't tend to be the kind of thing that people in the technology industry know or understand, which doesn't make them wrong yet, exactly. And I think it's kind of like what Steve Jobs did with Apple. Before that, technology was something that was about engineering, about math, and it's about science, and it's about code. And it wasn't about the design or how it looks or how it feels. He had to pair them up with the designers who knew that world. Well, now it's like we need to kind of pair up people who make technology with people who understand the inner subjective world.
Exactly.
And that's a whole other discipline, just like design was a whole other discipline.
Right.
And it's a philosophical discipline, and it's a you could say a spiritual discipline. There's an inner world in which there's a kind of wisdom to what tends to be better for people in that inner world and what tends to leave people feeling worse. So that's just something we have to do.
Yeah. What's deeply nourishing your soul rather than making you have to forget about your soul in a sense, or your inner world, and reach for something outside of yourself to fulfill yourself, when the well is within us and it's all within us. So I think that is literally that's the solution. I mean, that's definitely one of the solutions is using that same concept that Steve Jobs used and implementing people that do understand the inner world into the tech space. It really is that, I think. And I've thought about that often as well. And it's happening, but not at the fast rate that we need it to. So hopefully it's going to start, you know, because we need that. Absolutely. A question I actually have for you is, speaking of the inner world, I help my clients, I'm a light coach, and I help my clients reconnect to their inner child, which is exactly what you're talking about, you know, having to realize our inner world. And we have so many different parts within us.
Yeah.
What is something, if you could go back to a younger version of yourself, what is something you would tell to your younger version?
That I would tell my younger version of myself?
Yes.
One is just, I wish I was more in touch with that part, because I think just joking around and being more playful is something that I try to. I'm kind of a philosopher now, and so my instrument is thinking.
Yeah.
And but when I go home and I see family, or really it's actually through seeing family, it kind of reminds me of that younger part of myself that just kind of goofed around, and that's fun for me because I'm such a serious philosopher most of the time.
I feel the playfulness in you, though.
Yeah,
I mean, you're coming from the heart very, very much.
Yeah. Maybe this is just a story that I come from the head anyway, so who knows?
It's an old story.
Yeah. And
it was serving you for a while, but now you have a new story, I think. Yeah, because what you're doing is, very incoherence and incoherence, not incoherent.
I gotcha.
So this is the LightStyle interview series, and we're asking all of our incredible interviewees what LightStyle means to them. What is the ultimate LightStyle for you?
When I hear you say light, I also hear the other sort of light style, minimalist style. I don't know, I just try to keep my mind focused on the light, simple, focused things, and recognize that there's so many things that are going to be competing for attention, and it's LightStyle for me means trying to just simplify every part of my life as possible and spend the most time on the things that I care about. Because even something as simple as, let's say, I want to find a place to get a coffee, and I'll find myself, and I study this stuff, opening up, Yelp or Foursquare or something, looking for which of these coffee places, and then I start pogo sticking back and forth and figuring out which place I want to go to. And 5 minutes goes by and it creates all this stress just figuring out which of these coffee places. It doesn't even really matter to me. And so noticing that, what I try to do is just recognize that these are like choice-making moments that are just not actually that important. And what's more important, especially if I'm with someone, is just
go with the flow
and just be with them. So I try to notice all of these subtle distractions, what seem like everyday choices that actually don't matter, and what are the parts that really matter.
Right. It makes me remember something that I always say when I explain intuition, because that's what is at the core of it. We are using these apps, negating using our intuition. Like if we want to go to a coffee shop, just tune in and say, okay, let's just, let me guide myself, And apps, of course, I use them and they're amazing, of course, but, I think nature is such a powerful teacher when it comes to intuition, because, I grew up in Switzerland in the forest, and before cell phones, obviously, and I would just go, and I was young, and I would just go into the forest by myself, and I would get lost, but I would then find my way back. And that was one of the most powerful teachers. I say the trees taught me intuition, because when you are given the opportunity to just be your own guide, to be your own app, to be your own teacher, and tune into yourself and really become aligned with all your different tools and apps within you.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we have to get to.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that example. Thank you for sharing that. Well, it's been an absolute joy to shine a light on you, and what a beautiful synchronicity.
Yeah, it just happened to be.
Talk about alignment.
Mm-hmm.
One question I have is, so your philosophy on social media, do you have Facebook? What is a day in a life of you like?
I study this stuff for a living, and I still use my phone way too much.
Okay.
But big tips I usually give people are just to turn off all notifications from everything except for when actual people want your attention.
Oh.
So a text message, a Facebook message, but as a WhatsApp message, but not anything else, because usually those notifications come because a company wants your attention, not because it genuinely, there's something that you need. That's one thing. I also took everything off of my screen that's not just the first screen on your phone.
Oh.
That's not just a tool. That's just an in and out tool, like maps or calendar. They're just things you can only go in and go out.
Okay.
Nothing on the home screen that sucks you in. And then another thing is, for everything else that you want to open, learn to, if you have an iPhone, swipe down and type it by hand.
I do that.
Because when you swipe down and type, it forces your mind to make a conscious choice. You can't unconsciously type
You're
the
actually
first two
connecting.
characters. Yeah. And there's even a little thing, if you go to, in the iPhone, it's Spotlight and then search suggestions, I think, or Siri and then Spotlight search suggestions. You can turn that off so that when you swipe down, there's nothing there. So literally, from the moment of I have an intention that I want to pursue, and then going all the way to doing it, you can go straight there, straight path, without having any other interference. And I think in general, when you live intentionally and you are reflecting on what you care about in a moment, having as few possible interfering thoughts, feelings, or distractions between you and those paths as possible really does make a difference. It's so subtle, but in the same way that sitting down at a restaurant and the waiter could exactly at the wrong time, right when you're getting into the really juicy part of the conversation, they could ask you something, or so how do we make that easier for people?
I love that. Thank you for those suggestions. Those are some seriously good tools.
Yeah. Thanks for having me too.
Oh my gosh, of course. I mean, this was beautiful. Thank you so much. It's been such an honor. And how can people connect with you? How can they learn more about this movement and everything that you're doing?
They can check out the Time Well Spent website,
Okay.
timewellspent.io, or on Twitter, I'm Tristan Harris, and I don't use it too often, but it's available. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll put the links below.
Cool.
And thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
True pleasure. If you like this episode of the LightStyle interview series, please share with your friends and family, and don't forget to hit subscribe.